Staff kicks 92-year-old out of bank. Then police take him back to get the job done. An old man tries to secure a loan to buy a car for himself and his grandchild. Without it, they run the risk of becoming homeless. However, the tellers at the bank decline his application numerous times before an unlikely party comes to his rescue. Rob was as dedicated as they came. Years back, he'd been a family man, and life had been good for a while. However, life always seems to throw curveballs at him. He was 80 years old and had lost most of his family members. Those still alive lived oceans away and had not been in contact with him for years. Was this how one got repaid for living this long? He often wondered. Rob wished he had died along with his wife decades ago. She always brightened his days and always made every situation a little bit more bearable. He missed her terribly, but what could he do? He was, however, not entirely alone. He shared his rented apartment with his orphaned grandchild, but their living conditions were nothing to write home about. He always felt his grandchild, Anna, lived with him out of a lack of choice. While Anna was a hard-working young woman, she would have preferred to spend time with her friends than with her grandfather. Rob figured out as much, even though Anna was respectful enough to never say it to his face. One thing was clear, though. If they had to survive in this town, it would be best if they stuck together. When one chipped in with groceries, the other would pay the rent, and a month would go by. None of them had wished for such a life, but they had long decided they would take the bull by the horn and face life as it happened. Times were hard, and every so often the rent prices would hike, leaving tenants on the verge of homelessness. The manager was astounded. He turned back to the tellers, eyes red with anger. Rob was tired of it all and decided he would take out a loan from the bank, add it to his small savings, and buy a car for himself and his grandchild. It was a well-thought-out plan, but he'd not been prepared for the hurdles he would have to jump to achieve it. He'd been to the bank a number of times, but the clerks had turned him away, claiming he was not eligible for a loan due to his age. He even took up an extra job as an on-demand driver, but it still wasn't enough. "I have to go and try my luck again," he said to himself. "We can't live like this any longer." The following morning he woke up at the crack of dawn, dressed up as best as an 80-year-old can, and trotted to the bank a few blocks from his apartment. He had all his papers with him, offer letters from both his jobs and a copy of his bank statement showing his bank balances. He even had copies of his grandchild's pay slips just in case that would help him secure a loan. He came prepared for any eventuality. He walked in confidently and approached one of the teller's windows. But before he got there, he heard, "Not this old man again. This is the second time this month." Rob was shaken, but the statement did not stop him from approaching the teller. "Another loan application?" inquired the teller, half rolling her eyes. "Yes, I have all the necessary documents," answered Rob, opening the brown envelope containing all his papers. "Unless you've grown a little younger over the past month, we still can't grant you a loan," the teller said, looking at his colleagues for approval. "My credit score is great, and I have a steady income." "But you're still too old," the teller cut him off, even as the rest of his colleagues taunted Rob in hushed tones. Rob felt his face go red and considered turning around and running out of there. But here were his and his grandchild's livelihoods at stake. Surely he could push a little harder. "Please, just look at my documents. I know age does not factor." "And at what school did they teach you that?" asked a different teller, his lips curving into a smug smirk. Rob looked around him, hoping someone would jump to his rescue. "Please, I could lose my apartment. My grandchild and I could end up homeless," he begged as a final resort. "Sorry, if we could help you, we would, but you're just too old." "Old man, leave so we can attend to others," shouted a guard. Rob trembled with anger, and as he turned to leave, resigned to his fate, he could feel the teller's eyes boring into his back. He couldn't see them, but he knew that they were laughing at him in mockery. Once he got outside the bank, he started walking toward his apartment street, lost in thought, when he bumped into a police officer doing his rounds around the block. "Sorry, I should have watched where I was going," Rob apologized quickly, startled. "Just the person I needed to see." "That's all right, sir. You seem preoccupied. How can I help you?" offered the officer. Skeptical about sharing his thoughts, Rob apologized again, but the officer was not letting him off that easy. "You can talk to me," Officer Steve persuaded gently. Rob narrated his predicament. glad to pour out his frustrations to someone on neutral ground. Once he was done, Officer Steve was shocked at how badly the bank employees had treated the older man. He held Rob's hand and said, "Come with me. I may not be a banker, but even I know that age should not be a reason to be denied a loan." While he could not force the bank to grant Rob a loan, he could call out the employees for their unprofessional actions. They returned to the bank, and Steve asked to speak to the manager. Once he came, Steve narrated Rob's story, noting that Rob had been to the bank on several occasions, but had been turned away for the same reason, his age. The manager was astounded. He turned back to the tellers, eyes red with anger. Who turned this man away?" His voice boomed across the banking hall as the tellers pretended to be busy on their computer screens. "Could someone please show me where it states that age factors into a loan application?" he asked. The tellers cowered, and while they had been quick to chase Rob away, none came forward to claim their actions. The manager threatened to take legal action if they ever treated another client the same. He apologized profusely to Rob and offered to look at Rob's papers himself. As he walked the old man to his office at the back of the hall, he threw his tellers a threatening glare, almost as if he was daring them to ever repeat the mistake and see what would happen. 30 minutes later, Rob reappeared from the manager's office and could not help the smile on his face. He could finally secure a lovely apartment for himself and his grandchild. This reality brought him so much joy he forgot the hell he'd been through only minutes ago. He walked out of the bank a happy man and did not grant the tellers a second glance. 3 weeks later, Rob and Anna moved into their new apartment. Not having to worry about rent was indeed a dream come true, and he never once forgot to thank the officer who made it a reality. Help can come from the most unexpected places. Rob had almost given up on his dream to own a car, but when he approached the police officer, he was able to help him. Another great situation that saves this man's life. When cops arrive at his home, they discover him unconscious and trapped in the basement. 89-year-old Albert was a grumpy old man. All his neighbors knew that, but it wasn't entirely Albert's fault. As we get older, we want to be surrounded by our loved ones, our children and grandchildren, but Albert didn't have anyone he could share his worries with. His wife had passed away years ago due to cardiac arrest, and his sons barely checked on him after they all settled in different parts of the town with their families. Albert had so much in his heart, but he couldn't say it aloud. He was crumbling from within with loneliness, which is why he was so cranky, but nobody understood him. "He's lost his mind. Stay away from him. I've never seen his family visiting him. He's a lunatic. That's why his family pushed him away." These were just a few of the many things Albert's neighbors gossiped about behind his back. It pained him that people thought so lowly of him without even knowing his side of the story. Sometimes he would spend hours and hours talking to his late wife, crying, and silently praying to God to call him to the heavenly home. Other times he'd blame God for forcing him to live a lonely and miserable life. "Oh dear, how am I going to leave now?" he began to panic. He was trapped in the basement with no other way out. I still have regrets about that day. Perhaps I should have urged my partner to take over the case. There was a small ventilation window close to the ceiling, and he tried to shout for help, but it was no use. Nobody would rush to his aid. All his neighbors despised him, though he'd never been mean to anyone. Albert's body was trembling with fear. How? How do I get out? Lord, what do I do? 3 days passed. Albert was weak, starved, and dehydrated. His body was on the verge of giving way, and he gave up. "I'm coming, honey," he whispered to his wife, teary-eyed. "Maybe this is how it happens. This is how I finally get to see you." His phone suddenly beeped, and he saw the signal return. "Help me! I'm trapped! Please, I'm hungry," he cried. "We have your location, sir. A unit is on the way. Could you please tell us more about the nature of your problem? Hello? Sir, can you hear me?" Before Albert could finish his sentence, he passed out on the call, and the phone went dead. The battery died. "It's the police. Open the door," Officer Wooten called out, but there was no answer. "House isn't deserted," said Officer Davis. Locals said he lived alone. Old man, 89 years old probably. "Dad, you all right?" his elder son asked. "We're so sorry. We got so busy with our lives that we forgot to check on you." "Yes, Dad," his younger son said. "We realize we're wrong. "You boys better buckle up," Officer Wooten warned them. "Your father needs someone to care for him. Don't make the mistake I did. When I initially joined the force, my father was your father's age. This job is insane. You never know what'll happen. It was Dad's birthday, but I couldn't be there since I was investigating a case, and he died that night of a heart attack. I still have regrets about that day. Perhaps I should have urged my partner to take over the case for a day and spend more time with my father. Please don't do this to him. He deserves better," Officer Wooten added before leaving with his partner. Albert's sons recognized they were wrong to isolate him, so they hired a full-time nurse, and they visit him frequently now to check on him. Officer Wooten also occasionally stops by Albert's house to check on him. After all, he knows how elderly parents feel when they're lonely.